In this second video of 4, we will see how to set up Sage 100 to generate an ACH file to the requirements of your bank. After receiving the information from the bank on their requirements, select the Accounts Payable Setup menu and then go to ACH Maintenance. On the Main tab, enter the information about your bank account. In this case, we will select bank code A. We will select the Pre-Note Approved checkbox, especially if the bank does not want a pre-note during testing, but instead a sample live ACH file. The cash account number displays the general ledger cash account number and entered in your bank code maintenance that corresponds to the selected bank code. This field can only be viewed. For the immediate destination field, type the routing/transit number and description of the receiving point to which the file is being sent. The routing transit number is often your bank's American Bankers Association ABA number. However, your bank may direct you to enter a different number. If you enter an invalid routing transit number, a message appears asking if you want to accept the number, and you can if it is indeed what the bank wants. For the immediate origin field, type the routing/transit number and description assigned by your bank to identify your company's ACH file or the sending point of the file. The 9-character field begins with the 4-digit transit number followed by the 4-digit ABA number and the check digit. Your bank may direct you to enter your federal tax ID number in this field instead. If you enter an invalid routing transit number, a message appears asking if you want to accept the number, and it is a warning, so you can accept it if the bank requires. For the originating DFI field, type the originating depository financial institution DFI routing transit number for the bank issuing the ACH file on behalf of its clients. This field defaults to the first 8 characters entered in the immediate origin field, but you can change it if your bank directs you to do so. Next, click the Records tab to select options that determine how the ACH file is structured. Not all the fields in this tab are populated, but we will discuss the fields that are usually required by your bank. For the immediate origin leading character, type the leading character that goes before the immediate origin routing transit number if required by your bank. This could be blank. Most cases, it's the digit 1. For the file creation date, select which date will be used as the file creation date in the ACH file, as directed by your bank. Select Run Date to use the computer systems date. Select System Date to use the Accounts Payable module date. And select Effective Date to use the date entered when printing vendor remittance advice forms. Typically, this is the run date, but not always. In this next frame, for the character to precede a company ID field, type the character that your bank requires as the first character in a company ID field before the company ID in the ACH file, if they so require it. In this case, I will put the digit 1 again. For the alternate company ID number field, type the company ID required by your bank. If the bank requires the same federal ID number entered in company maintenance, you can leave this field blank, and the number from the company maintenance will be used in the ACH file. You can also type the alternate company name required by your bank. If the bank requires the same company name entered in company maintenance, you can leave this field blank, and the name from the company maintenance will be used in the ACH file. Now to the right side of the screen. For the pad file to block size field, Select this checkbox if your bank requires that ACH files be generated as complete blocks of 10 records each. If you select this checkbox, select the padding option required by your bank, either block size to 9 or block size to 10. Clear this checkbox if your bank does not require that the ACH files be generated as complete blocks of 10. As directed by the bank specification, select whether they require a block size 9 or 10. In this case, we will set the block size to 9, which is the most common. For the service class code field, type the service class code for the batch header record, record type 5, and the batch control record, record type 8 in the ACH file. The service class code identifies the classification of dollar entries to be exchanged. You would type 200 if the ACH file will contain both debit and credit entries. Type 220 if the ACH file will only contain credit entries. And type 225 if the ACH file will contain only debit entries. For our purposes, I will enter 200. For the standard entry class field, enter one of the following entries in this field. Type a class code to identify the transactions that will be transmitted. Type PPD for pre-arranged payment and deposit. Type CCD for a cash concentration or disbursement. For this purposes, today I'm going to use PPD, pre-arranged payment and deposit. This is the one I usually see the most. For the descriptive date field, select a date to use as a descriptive date in the ACH file. Select run date to use the company's system date. Select system date to use the accounts payable module date, and select effective date to use the date entered when printing vendor remittance forms. I will use the run date, which is the run date of the computer's system date. The zero fill settlement date, select this checkbox to add a 3-character settlement date to the batch header record, record type 5. By default, the settlement date is 000. Clear this checkbox if your bank requires that the settlement date field be blank. Next, click the Additional tab to select options that determine how the ACH file is structured. Most of the fields on this tab are not utilized unless specified by your bank. However, 2 fields will usually need to be determined and required information will need to be entered. One is information if your bank requires a debit record in the ACH file. Select this checkbox if your bank requires a debit entry in the ACH file. An entry detail record will be created in the file after all of the vendor records. Your bank may use the term balance file format when a debit record is required. Leave this checkbox blank if a debit record is not required. The other field that is usually set up is to determine if a carriage return and/or line feed is required in the ACH file format. Select an option to add a carriage return after each record in the ACH file. Select yes to add a carriage return and line feed combination after each record. Select no to add nothing to the record. Select carriage return only to include only a carriage return after each record. Select line feed only to include only a line feed after each record. Select line feed then carriage return to add a line feed and then a carriage return after each record. For our purposes, I'm going to select yes, as this is the most popular. When you're completed setting up the ACH maintenance for the bank, simply click Accept to save the ACH information for the bank. The next video will demonstrate the setup of each vendor's banking information that you wish to pay using an ACH file, and how to generate a test ACH file for bank approval if a pre-note is not wanted or required. Thanks again for your attention today.